Hey guys, TKC here with a brand new segment. This segment is going to be called Kaijudo Rankings. So I'm pretty much starting this segment because the KMCs have finally started again. It is Season 3 or KMC Spring 2014 season, and it has just started and it's very, very exciting. For the people who are interested in the results of the past two KMCs that happened this weekend, be sure to go on my website, KaijudoChannel.com, go on the header, click tournaments, and you'll be able to see the deck lists from Georgia and the deck archetypes from Anaheim. So basically, at the end of every week, as long as I get enough results to kind of formulate some sort of ranking of decks and cards and stuff like that, I'm going to go over which decks got an increase in play, which decks got a decrease in play, and the same thing for the cards themselves. Now hopefully this segment will help you KMC competitors out there to better prepare for your KMCs coming up soon, to see which cards or decks are being a bit more played than they used to be, and which ones you should be preparing for instead of ones that you were originally preparing for before, but they're not doing as well as they are now. This segment will pretty much give you these neat little tidbits of analysis that might help you out a little bit in constructing your deck to better prepare for the meta. So let's go ahead and start with the top 5 deck increases since the last time I calculated the ranking. So let me just make things a little bit more clear here. The last time I generated rankings was pretty much a couple weeks after the Winter Championship. So I believe I calculated a couple ARG tournaments, one in Montreal and one in St. Louis, and that was pretty much the last tournament at the time when I generated the rankings. But now, with this week, with the KMCs going on and all the other tournaments that happened, like there were 2 Kerwin stores, there was an Abyss tournament, and things like that, and there was also an ARG tournament, those will be factored into this week's rankings. So it's basically this rankings compared to basically 2 weeks after the championships rankings. So from the top 5 deck increases, it goes in this order. The most increased played deck now is 5 Civ Control, followed by Lightwire Fire Dragons, Mono Fire Rush, Lightwire Dark Control, and Mono Water. Now 5 Civ Control got an increase of 17.52%. That is a huge increase in the metagame, and that is because of the Kerwin's Game Store tournament. I believe 3 people top 8'd with 5 Civ Control there, including the winner, Tyler Hine, using 5 Civ Control. Now this was originally developed by Donnelly Wilson, who top 8'd at the Winter Championships. He went completely undefeated in Swiss, and then got really unlucky against Noah Kessel in top 8. So the deck was pretty much a dark horse deck, and I think a lot of people noticed that this deck was actually very, very powerful. And so the Hine brothers and a couple others kind of took this deck and kind of improved it in their own kind of way, and it's doing really good in a bunch of tournaments right now. It won the Kerwin's tournament, and it also won the KMC in Georgia, piloted by Tim Asmoseev, and he used like the 66 card version of the deck, which was absolutely nuts. Now Mono Fire Rush on this list is actually very interesting because the KMC in Anaheim was won by none other than this 13-year-old in a Pikachu suit using Mono Fire, and he beat Steven Liberto in the finals, who was also using 5 Civ Control. Who would have thunk it would have been 5 Civ Control in finals? So congratulations to you, Nam Win, for winning your KMC, and you will also be the youngest competitor to ever compete in a championships. Awesome stuff. So next we gotta look at the bottom 5 decks, the droppers, and the first one would have to be Lightwater Nature Megabugs. It got a huge drop. It got a drop of 12.8%, and there haven't been any Megabugs that have been topping recently. There's only been 1 Megabugs that topped, and I believe that was in the ARG event in Nashville. Patrick Williams piloted it and got 2nd place. He had a really cool list. I highly suggest you check it out. There's a huge drop because at the LCQs and Winter Championships, everyone was using Megabugs. It was pretty much everywhere. Lightwire Nature Tempo was pretty much all over the top 8. So because there was all over the top 8 and now there's like none at all, it got a really, really huge drop. The other decks that follow after Megabugs, Light Dark Nature Control and Light Dark Control, those are basically Kalima decks, but I kind of categorize it as control because it's not just, you know, Kalima control. Sometimes they use Haven as well, so it's pretty much control, and then they choose to use Haven or Kalima or both. So those 2 have been dropping quite a bit. The last time Kalima's done very well was at the championships. It got top 8 by David Pendergrass, and also Preston used a Light Dark Nature Control that used Kalima as well. And the last 2 on the list are Lightwater Dark Tempo and Lightwater Dark Fire Dragons, and guess what? These are also decks that did very well at champs. Bobby Break won with Lightwater Dark Fire Dragons, and Noah Kessel got top 4 with Lightwater Dark Stormspark Tempo, but also those two decks haven't been doing too well recently. Dragons is pretty much nowhere, and I'm kind of surprised because at the two KMCs this weekend, no Dragons at all, but Tempo and Controls all over the place, and Dragons love to eat Tempos. Now let's go to the risers and droppers of creatures. Top 5 risers. The biggest riser in the creatures is none other than Major Owl. This guy brings on the pain, and guess what? Major Owl is in 5-Civ Control, which is also a deck that's been doing so well lately. So Major Owl got a huge boost, 1.25% increase in play. Major Owl is pretty much one of the focal points of this 5-Civ Control deck. You know, you combo that with Haven, and it's an 8,500 fast attacking blocker that can get rid of 2 creatures, which is absolutely insane. And also just playing it on turn 5 or even turn 4 when you sprout is really, really good against Tempo because, you know, they're attacking your shields and you just go ow and kill that and everything's banished and you have Ow on the field and he's like, roar, I'm gonna eat everything. So Ow, biggest riser in creatures. Follow that with Neuron, Cyber Trader, Cyber Sprite, and Kivu. Neuron, Cyber Trader, and Cyber Sprite are the interesting ones. These are all Cyber Lords, and they were in 2 top 8 decks in Georgia. One of them by Scott Seaver, who was using a Lightwire Nature Tempo that pretty much shoved all the Evos it wants in there. So it put Neuron, Hive Queen, and Blinder Beetle Prime, 3 copies of each. And then Nathan Bond also top 8'd with none other than Mono Water, which is an interesting choice. And obviously, if you're using Mono Water, you're using the Cyber Lords, so he used that kind of package as well. Now, as for the bottom 5 creatures, this is very, very interesting, but the biggest dropper in the creatures is Keeper of Laws with a 2.7% decrease. That's huge. Now, this is kind of interesting, because Keeper of Laws, well, it's used in a lot of different decks. It's used in Control, and it's used in Tempo, and it's even used in Rush at times. So if you look at the rest of this list, we have Humunculon the Blaster, Manapod Beetle, Stratus Beetle, and Swordhorn. And guess what? All these cards are in Megabugs, which is the biggest dropper in the decks. So that's why they all got a huge decrease in play. Now the thing I'm really confused about is that Keeper of Laws is so good against Control. So if you're using Control deck and you're going against 5-Civ Control who doesn't have Keeper of Laws, you have a huge advantage over them because you play Keeper of Laws and they're like, oh, what do I do? Now every spell I play, they draw a card and it just causes headache for the 5-Civ Control deck. If you guys want to beat 5-Civ Control, you have to be using Keeper of Laws. This is probably like the best counter to the 5-Civ deck because they really don't have many answers to Keeper of Laws. I mean, they have Bone Blades, they have like Piercing and stuff like that, but it doesn't happen too often. You know, if you stick a Keeper of Laws, especially when you have multiple creatures along with it, you're going to be doing just fine. So I do predict that Tempo will see an increase in play and it'll be doing very well, especially if it uses Keeper of Laws and then other small creatures to go with it, like, you know, Cyber Scamp, Lost Patrol, and Swordhorn and stuff like that. Basically, Tempo in general is going to get an increase in play. I definitely see that, and Keeper of Laws is just going to go right through those decks, I hope. That should be the counter to 5-Civ, but I guess we'll have to see. Now, as for the spells, the top 5 risers and spells, guess what? Every single one of this top 5 is from the 5-Civ Control deck. We have Crystal Memory at the top with 1.97% increase, Tendril Grasp, Reverberate, Sprout, and Drillstorm. I think I'd like to point out Crystal Memory here. It's at the top. Crystal Memory is just great. It just toolboxes into all your 1-ofs or any card you need in any certain situation, especially when you go against aggressive decks. You'd be like, oh, let me go get Major Owl, and then I just destroy you, or things like that. Speaking of 1-ofs, you should probably talk to Corey Gaudreau about his deck, because in his top 8 at the Kerwin's Game Store 1K, he used probably the most 1-ofs I've ever seen in a deck. You could probably talk to Tom Rogers too. He's the master of 1-ofs as well. But, you know, Crystal Memory is probably one of the main reasons why that deck works so well, even though there's, like, so many 1-ofs. You have Crystal Memory, and then you have Reverberate, or even, like, Tritonus, to just, like, draw a bunch of cards, and then, hey, you'll find your 1-ofs that will help against certain, you know, archetypes. Tendril Grasp is another one I want to kind of point out. It's very, very good against Tempo. Of course, the 5-Civ Control deck has Major Owl, and it also has Drillstorm to deal with a lot of annoying creatures from the Tempo decks, but it doesn't get rid of cards like Swordhorn and, you know, Tricky Turnip and things like that. So yeah, 5 spells, all from 5-Civ Control. Whoopie-doo! Next, we're going to go to the bottom 5 spells, and guess what? Just like the creatures, these are all from Lightwater Nature Tempo decks. We have Stormspark Blast, Root Trap, Piercing Judgment, Reap and Sow, and Oathsworn. Okay, maybe not Reap and Sow, that's a bit different, but the other 4 are all from Lightwater Nature Tempo decks. The huge decrease with Stormspark Blast is probably the biggest surprise here. Stormspark is just like Tendril Grasp and Drillstorm. It deals with Tempo very well if it's in the right shield. And I think it has to be used at 3 nowadays. It's just so useful. It's another answer to Keeper of Laws, so you can tap them without targeting. It's an answer to, you know, Haven and all the other insane blockers. You just tap all of them and then go for game. It's pretty much just an absolutely needed card, I think, and it has to be used at 3. You can get away with using it at 2. I personally like it at 2, but I think with the way the meta is now, 3 is pretty much the right call for Storm Spark Blast. So that's pretty much it for this very first episode of Kaijudo Rankings. I really hope you enjoyed this. I personally love this stuff myself. I'm a huge stats geek, and I just love analyzing metas and stuff like this, and hopefully this will help me and it will help you guys in the KMCs coming up. So hopefully if all goes well and I get the deck list and stuff like that, I'll be able to do this every week, and you guys could, you know, use this however you'd like. So at the end of every episode, before I go, I'm going to go ahead and leave off the top 10 cards and the top 10 decks, not necessarily the droppers and risers, but just overall the top 10 decks right now and the top 10 cards right now, so you can go ahead and check that out and do whatever you'd like with it. Be sure to check out all this awesome stuff at KaijudoChannel.com. I believe right now the rankings are not actually up on the website, but very soon it will be, and you'll be able to browse all these interesting stats. Alright guys, this is TKC, signing off, see you later, have a great day.